Good afternoon and welcome to the Livewire, UNC Charlotte's forum for conversations with newsmakers from here on campus and beyond. I'm Will Citty. Over the last few years, acts of violence in public places across the country have led Americans to question not only their own safety, but also how those at risk for destructive behavior are being identified and treated. Increasing awareness of the significance of mental health has driven a corresponding rise in the attention paid to professions that deal with people's emotional and mental well-being. In elementary, middle, and high schools across the country, school counselors and teachers have the primary responsibility for making sure students get the support they need. But the job of a school counselor is much more than an on-site psychologist or the pre-college advisor of decades past. Counselors now play an important role in many aspects of student life. On this week's edition of the Livewire, UNC Charlotte Department of Counseling professors Sejal Foxx and Clare Merlin explain where the profession has been, where it's going, and why it matters more than ever in schools today. Thank both of you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So just to establish a baseline here, for people who may not have heard a lot about school counseling or the profession in general, what does a school counselor do?
Well, a school counselor does wear multiple hats, but generally speaking, we categorize the role of a school counselor in three major roles, and that is to provide career post-secondary support, academic support, and personal social support, which is what you were speaking to in your introduction. That's sort of where the emotional support that students need in schools, where a school counselor comes in, looks at interventions, looks at resources in the community, and making sure that they connect with the families to ensure that students do get those supports.
School counselors can use a variety of tools, too, to accomplish those goals. So although there is still individual counseling that occurs at every school level, school counselors also utilize group counseling. They do something called classroom guidance, where they go into classrooms just like teachers would, and they teach, an entire 30-minute or hour-long lesson about a topic related to career development, academic achievement, or personal social development, and then they can implement other interventions school-wide.
A certain generation of people would have known the person who's now known as a school counselor as a guidance counselor. How does the change in name reflect an evolving role for these professionals in schools?
Well, the guidance counselor came about with the vocational movement, where Frank Parsons really came about and said that the guidance counselors were the ones in schools who were going to help guide students in their vocational development. Well, now, because of what you're seeing in our world today, that it's becoming very global, there we have a lot more diversity in our schools, a lot more diverse needs in our schools. That really has required then the school counselor to respond differently. So we've moved from guidance to school counseling because we see that the school focus is more broad, that we don't just focus on the career aspect anymore. We are focusing on making sure that school students are academically successful and also are able to move through that K through 12 progression with the supports that they need. Another major transition is that we are accountable for what we do. With No Child Left Behind, we know that all educators have to be accountable for their time spent in schools, and our work is no different. We have to show accountability for how we are providing interventions, show the evidences of what those interventions are.
I'll add that in the 1990s and the 2000s, as we saw some reforms emerging in the field of school counseling, and this new role came about in a more defined way, the American School Counseling Association and others who were helping to make these changes sort of initiated this idea that let's call this something different. Let's call this new role school counseling to go along with the new duties and this new role identification rather than a guidance counselor.
Everyone can use a good rebrand once in a while.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
So the American School Counselors Association has put together a graphic that expresses some of the changes we've just been talking about. Could you walk us through what we're seeing here with the ASCA national model?
The ASCA national model came out with a framework from which all school counselors can operate. And you can see in the model, we first have a delivery system, which we were talking about earlier. Dr. Merlin was talking about the individual counseling, their curriculum support, and doing classroom guidance. The individual student planning, which is where we think about school counselors working with individual students about their college decision making and applications, the courses that they're going to take in schools. Responsive services, so in your introduction you talked about the crises and the violence that happens in schools. So we know that daily there are crises that are happening in schools, and school counselors do respond to those in those instances, and the system support. So we also like to connect ourselves to the mission, the vision of individual schools. We look at school improvement plans, and we look at ourselves and see how the school counseling programs can support the overall mission of that school. That then leads to a school counselor developing a foundation for their program. So that foundation is really about what their mission is going to be in terms of that school counseling program, but also the year. We do have national standards for practice, which is the national standards with the academic, career, and personal social. So we do align our work to national standards.
So the management system helps sort of facilitate everything that a school counselor will do. So both delivering those services and managing the foundation that they're built on. So this might be a calendar that a school counselor uses to guide them throughout the year, agreements with their administrators and their faculty about what they're going to do. And the last component is accountability. As Dr. Foxx mentioned earlier, school counselors aren't immune to having to be accountable for what they're doing. And so they are encouraged to regularly collect data on the interventions that they're implementing, and also to look at school-wide data and to see if that changes at all based on the interventions they're conducting in schools.
Could you give us a sense of what portion of the day-to-day work for a school counselor is spent interacting with students?
We'd say that it varies by school and school needs, but we actually in North Carolina have a statute that is modeled after the ASCA national model that says that school counselors should spend 80% of their time in direct contact with students. And that direct contact is also, again, related to the personal, social, academic, and career development, and also the responses and the responsive services and the crises that occur. So we know that that is sometimes a struggle in schools, but we now have a model with ASCA and our state that says that school counselors should be spend most of their time in direct services.
Anything to add there?
Just that I've been impressed. I worked in other states before, and there was no law on the books saying that, and I've been impressed that I think increasingly more school counselors in North Carolina are spending close to 80% of their time directly with students, parents, and other school stakeholders.
And Dr. Merlin, you were very recently yourself a school counselor before you came into the academic realm. Between those two, could you tell us about the job market? What's it like for a graduating student who just came out of your department?
Sure. So when the economy tanked a few years ago, we saw that like teachers, school counselors were struggling to find jobs. Since then, though, things have steadily improved, and now I think the job market is as healthy as it ever has been for school counselors. That varies a bit state to state or district to district, but here in Charlotte in particular, there are a lot of job openings for school counselors. In the program in which we teach at UNC Charlotte, many of our school counseling master's students actually have full-time jobs as school counselors before they even graduate. And those that don't, I found, for example, my students graduating here in December already have jobs lined up for January. So in this area in particularly, the job market is great.
How do school administrations deal with allocating the proper amount of school counselors for their student population? Is that something that they struggle with?
Well, I think that there are some mandates in some districts that there should be at least one school counselor. ASCA has a ratio of 250 to 1 school counselor, but the national average is more about 500, close to 600 to 1. And I know that we are constantly having to show through accountability how we can be effective as school counselors. So when school administrators are having to make tough decisions about their budget and who to keep. Do you keep someone in the classroom to teach those core courses, or do you have someone of a support? And sometimes that's when those decisions are made to maybe not have the lower ratio because of just affordability and the difficult budgets that school administrators have to deal with.
I think anyone who can remember their own transition from elementary to middle and then to high school will remember that you're dealing with very different things as you grow up and go through those different levels of school. I'm interested, what are the different challenges and the different things that a school counselor would deal with at each of those respective levels?
I've been a former elementary and high school counselor. I've done a lot of work in the middle schools. For elementary students, it's definitely the transition of coming from their homes. We did a lot of sort of work with kindergarten students, first graders, with the issues of transitioning into school. And we also know that not all students come ready to learn, that not all students have had access to books in their homes. And so we know that there's a lot of places in which school counselors have to step in and give those types of supports. School counselors at the elementary school level tend to provide a lot of classroom guidance services related to sort of getting along with each other, respecting each other, really helping them develop those habits of how to engage in the classroom, be in the classroom, and respond to each other in a healthy way. When we get to the high school, middle school level, we certainly now are thinking developmentally, because middle school students are dealing with the physical, emotional development that they just can't escape. So you add that on to the academic pressures that they begin to experience in middle school, and so that's when we start seeing a lot of the peer conflicts, having to deal with those kinds of issues, teaching them to resolve those conflicts again in a healthy way. We've seen a lot of how technology, use of social media has really impacted the way they're communicating with each other, sometimes in not so positive ways. So having to teach them how to deal with social media. And then high school, we certainly then transition into preparing them for the post-secondary education. And we would say that we should start that in elementary school, but we certainly see more of a focus in high school. Dr. Merlin?
I would just add that although there are such drastic differences among students and developmental levels at elementary, middle, and high school, it's important to note that school counselors are able to work in all three domains at each level. So they're able to do career development, academic achievement, and social emotional development, regardless of the age of the children.
And you mentioned social media, and that sort of made me think, as these sort of new issues emerge, what is professional development like for a school counselor? Because clearly you can't always anticipate what the next thing is going to be that's going to be ingrained in a student's life. How do school counselors keep up to date with those sort of things?
Well, appreciate you asking that question. I just wrapped up my professional school counseling course, and students were part of their coursework was to develop classroom units on major issues that are happening in schools. So while many of them don't know Snapchat and those kinds of things, they're now being asked to go and find out how to research these kinds of things, talk to families, talk to students, and really get in there and sort of get in their way of doing some research about those things that they don't have access to or don't really know much about. So we have started that in our program, but we train our school counselors to know that they should always be engaged in professional development, much like classroom teachers are. We have a state conference every year, a national conference every year. We have webinars. We have a lot of resources for school counselors to be engaged in professional development on a continuous basis.
Now, as I mentioned prior, school counselors have been sort of moving into the spotlight here, and that's not only because of grassroots concerns resulting from things that are happening in the news, but that's also because of concerted efforts at the highest levels of our government to pay more attention. Could you tell me a little bit about that and about what's happening?
Certainly. Our First Lady, Michelle Obama, last summer, 2 summers ago, spoke at our national conference in Orlando, and it was a very big surprise to the attendees, and she came out as our keynote acknowledging that school counselors were central to the post-secondary achievement of our K-12 students. And that was the first time that a national leader had ever uttered the word school counseling, and that was a very exciting time for those of us who have been in the profession to get that acknowledgement of the work that we do in schools and the impact that we can have.
I was fortunate to be at the First Lady's speech down in Orlando, and I think the reason it was such a powerful event for school counselors was because not only was she talking about school counselors, she was doing so accurately. And she was talking about the real challenges we face in having appropriate professional development, in having too many students on our caseload, in trying to find time in our day to meet with all the students we need to meet with. So she really made us feel like, I get you, I understand this profession, and I think that's so important to be happening on a national level.
Now, the outgrowth of some of these efforts has been the Reach Higher initiative, which First Lady Obama is heading up. How do school counselors fit into that program?
Well, Reach Higher was established to support the President's North Star 2020 goal. We want to, basically to be first in the world again in college degrees. And so this is a response to that. And through research with our superintendent, basically she noted that school counselors were the ones who had the skills, had the skills in schools to be able to provide academic support, academic advising, the financial literacy that not only students need but families need. And so she found that school counselors were the one person in the school building that really had the skills to respond to making sure that all students had access to the most variety of opportunities, and certainly starting at an early age in elementary.
Now, NSC, let me get this acronym right because it is a mouthful. NCS-CPS, that is a counseling-specific consortium that's been organized under the Reach Higher initiative. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And what do they do?
They have hosted, they started hosting convenings around our country. The first one was hosted at Harvard, the second at San Diego, and the last one that I attended was at University of North Florida. But they're basically, they're focusing on responding to First Lady Obama's initiative in the sense that we want to make sure that school counselors and school counselor educators are prepared to take on this task, that we do sort of rally ourselves and rally the profession to make sure that we are using our skills, we are using our training, and ensuring that all students have access to post-secondary education.
This year, for the first time ever, the National Counselor of the Year was recognized at the White House. Dr. Merlin, what does that mean to you as someone in the profession to have that recognition?
I think, again, as sort of a continuation of the First Lady's presence at the American School Counseling Association, them inviting the School Counselor of the Year finalists and awarding the award at the White House really said to those of us who are school counselors and school counselor educators, you matter, and what you do in schools is valuable, and we want to recognize that. Just as they've done for years with teachers, now doing that with school counselors really sends that message.
Reach Higher and North Star, as you mentioned, are centrally focused on higher education. What role do school counselors play in making that happen for students, specifically with the process of applying and all the things that are related to that?
Well, school counselors, because of the domains, and one of them is the career post-secondary domain, we do begin having those conversations at the elementary level. And so related to Reach Higher, it's more than just talking about access to those opportunities, but it's really advocating for those opportunities. So for an example of that is if a middle school student gets into high school and they've had straight A's in their math coursework in middle school, and then they get to high school and they're taking a regular algebra level course. Well, they might not have the family members or the support outside of their home to say or encourage them to push them to take advanced level math courses. So the school counselor is really in a position of advocacy to say, you have this successful history of doing well in math, and we want to push you to do honors math, to put you on a track to start taking advanced placement courses or dual enrollment. So because we know that it's so competitive for students to get into universities that we want to make sure that they have the competitive opportunities, that they are prepared to take the SAT, ACT, and the entrance exams. And it's really about making sure that starting very early on, we have conversations about what those opportunities are. And we're not just talking about four-year institutions, we're talking about a two-year vocational program, some sort of training after high school. The most important position that a school counselor needs to take is that we don't want to limit anyone's opportunity. We want to expand those opportunities so that the student and the family has a choice.
Dr. Merlin, Dr. Foxx mentioned the advocacy role of a school counselor. Do you think, sort of as we've dug deeper into the school experience and seen that it's not always just what happens in the classroom that defines a student's success, and we've realized that it's out-of-class supports, it's people that will advocate for you, has that recognition helped raise the significance of school counseling?
I think we have seen that a little bit in recent years. Unfortunately, it's taken tragic events, school shootings, Sandy Hook, and other current events like that. But I think people are becoming a little more aware that we need an individual in the building to support students, to be there when crises come up, or to advocate, like in the example Dr. Fox just shared. And when you look around, you find that, wait, there is someone who's been trained to do this and who's very skilled at it, and that's a school counselor.
I think we also have to directly address the specter of violence that many students deal with in schools, far too common these days. What sort of training are your students getting in terms of identifying and helping these students who are at risk for these violent behaviors?
Because it's a master's level degree, our curriculum that they follow, we do make sure in our counseling programs we are KCREP accredited, which is our national accreditation, and that means they start with theories that will help them build those basic counseling skills, learn to identify the concerns that arise. So our students learn to do suicide assessments, they learn to assess for depression, a lot of the major mental health concerns, because by the time we see them on the news, we've missed providing the support services that we should have early on. So we want to make sure that our students who graduate from our programs very well prepared to be able to look at those kinds of concerns that are emotionally showing up in the classroom. And oftentimes we might just look at their academic performance, but when we look at someone who's failing, it's usually just a symptom of what's happening personally.
That school counselors are very skilled and they're trained in all of these things, but they're also taught to be aware of their limits and their boundaries. And unfortunately, school counselors don't have time to do ongoing therapy in the schools. So we really emphasize in our program to know when to refer out, and that's something that our students are trained in and they learn to practice in their internships. When they do see a student who's in need, maybe who's experiencing depression or showing some other concerning symptoms, to refer out to a skilled clinician and then to advocate that that student gets those services, whether it's to an administrator or a parent.
Well, with the 10 minutes or so we have left, I do want to focus a little bit in on the counseling department here at UNC Charlotte. Could you give me a bit of an intro to the department? You mentioned accredited by the National Accreditation Board for Counseling. What else can you tell me?
Well, we have quite a diverse faculty. We have, in terms of experience and expertise, we have a school counseling program, we have a clinical mental health program, and addictions program. So we also offer a variety of electives within our program, so students can come in and they have the standard course requirements, but then we have electives that grief counseling, crisis counseling, supporting students with their issues of related to spirituality. So we offer a variety of different types of electives as well. So the department is a large program. We have a master's program and a PhD program, and when they graduate, they can sit for their licensing exam and become an LPC licensed professional counselor or a certified school counselor in the state.
Dr. Merlin, I know in the College of Education in general, community outreach and being involved with the community is something that is very important to us. Could you talk to us a little bit about how the counseling department reaches out into the community and how that informs the way the department teaches its classes?
Sure. So in order to graduate from the Department of Counseling at UNC Charlotte, students have to complete 700 hours of doing clinical work in the field. So they do a 100-hour practicum and 2 300-hour internships, and those have to either be in a community setting if they're studying addictions or clinical mental health counseling, or in a K-12 school if they're getting the school counseling degree. So right there, they're sort of required to do that community outreach, to become connected to some sort of organization or a school, and to contribute to those students' or clients' lives. In addition, several of the faculty members have started new initiatives to partner with different schools or organizations. Do you want to talk about the ones you've started recently?
Certainly. So related to the Reach Higher initiative, we've started to partner with the Cato Early Engineering High School, where we provided classroom guidance lessons to all 9th grade students, essentially talking about post-secondary options, so that while we know that the students are there to learn about engineering, it doesn't mean that they're all going to go into engineering. We certainly hope for that, but we want to make sure that, again, that they are prepared, that their families are prepared for them to be successful in post-secondary environments. Dr. Gutierrez and I also have a partnership in Cabarrus County with a performance learning center, and that school is basically supporting students who are at risk, who for some reason have not been successful in their home school. So we have doctoral students there providing counseling services on a weekly basis.
And you mentioned that Cato Engineering High School. For those that don't know, that is a high school here on UNC Charlotte's campus that is filled with CMS students who are interested in those areas.
Correct.
So let's talk a little bit about, since the fact that this is a master's level program, there may be some people that have already been out in the working community and are maybe interested in getting this degree. Are there ways to do this where you're part-time, for instance?
Yes, our program is very flexible. Our students can go part-time. For our master's students, the courses are generally offered in the evening. So we have quite a few students who work full-time, who have families. They are teachers, come from the business sector, and they've chosen this as their second career. So we want to make sure that we have sort of open doors to those individuals who have found their passion of school counseling, and we want to make sure that we offer a program that allows them to complete their coursework.
So Dr. Merlin, is a master's degree required, though, for someone to be a school counselor in North Carolina, and are there any other requirements beyond that?
So in order to be a professional school counselor at a public school in North Carolina, you have to have a master's degree, preferably from an accredited institution like UNC Charlotte that's accredited by KCREP. You also have to complete the course clinical work that I mentioned earlier, those practicum and internship experiences, and then pass a praxis exam, which is parallel to the exam that teachers take in order to get into the classroom.
Dr. Foxx, what do you hear from students about the strengths of the program? I know you've been talking to some alumni and current students recently working on your department's website, but what have you heard?
Well, I would say that I've heard from students that they are learning from a diverse faculty, that it's really valuable for them to hear from a diverse set of experiences that our faculty brings with them, that they have exposure early on because of the practicum and internship experiences to the profession, so that they know early on that this is what they want to do. They certainly have reported in surveys that they had the curricular experiences to really support their development and becoming school counselors, so that they learn their counseling skills, they learn how to establish a comprehensive school counseling program, they know how to use data to be accountable once they get into the school building.
In UNC Charlotte, the Department of Counseling has a particular emphasis on multiculturalism and training our students to be multiculturally competent and being aware of our own biases and cognizant of our own experiences with depression. So that also has come up in conversations with current and former students. They've acknowledged that some of those conversations are hard to have, and sometimes it's challenging to have to look inside and examine one's own privileges, but they've reported that they actually appreciate that about our department, that they feel more multiculturally competent when they then go out into the world.
Before we go, I'd quickly like to know why each of you went into this profession.
I chose this profession because I'm really passionate about making sure that students have opportunities to be successful. I'm an immigrant to the United States. My family came to this country basically for opportunity. And what that meant though was that while my parents could not really navigate the K-12 setting, they didn't really understand that, I had to find other resources to support me in getting into higher education. And so I understand the value and the importance of having adults in one's life to help navigate through the systemic sort of nature of accessing college and post-secondary opportunities. And I really want to make sure that all students have that it doesn't mean that their circumstance should keep them from having those opportunities to be successful and have those life choices.
Similarly, I had a personal experience in college, working in several internships with low-income students of color and feeling like they needed an advocate. And rather than getting a teaching degree or a leadership degree, I felt like school counseling was a really meaningful path towards helping all students, advocating for them, creating systemic change in schools so that all students can find success when they graduate high school.
Dr. Foxx, Dr. Merlin, thank you so much for being here today. It was great to hear about this growing department and about this changing profession.
Thank you so much.
For more information on the counseling department at UNC Charlotte, go to counseling.uncc.edu. And for more great content from our broadcast department, check out our YouTube channel.